but I'm good now.
Right. I'm gonna get started here. If other people log in, if we get a big crowd that logs in, I may interrupt and repeat some of what I'm going to say here now. But first off, thank you all for attending. This is the first of two open forums for the Bradley community, faculty, and staff to give input into the strategic planning process. So again, welcome. Oh, welcome back to school also. So welcome back to second semester. Welcome to 2021.
Yeah.
And thanks for attending today. For folks on the live stream, at present, I don't think there is anybody out on the live stream, but if that would happen, and anyone else, if you have questions that you feel uncomfortable asking the president in person, or comments that you feel uncomfortable making in person, you can either send them to me in the chat, send it as a personal chat, not to the whole group if you don't want everybody to see it. Or if you want even greater anonymity, you can email it to my Bradley email account, mtim@bradley.edu, and I'll be monitoring that also. You can also, if for some reason you think I'm not paying attention, you could send a live chat to Chris Jones or send him an email. I just wanted to make 2 points about the strategic planning process. One of the things that's going to be very different this time, there's 2 things that are going to be very different. It's going to be much more narrowly focused, and the timeline is much more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that the timeline can be more aggressive is because it's going to be more narrowly focused. With that said, we do want to go fairly quickly, but the challenge has been, how do we go quickly and not overwhelm the community with extra work when people are already very busy? And so we've been trying to strike that balance. If you feel at any point like that balance is wrong, or that you think we are in fact going too quickly, please feel free to email me, and I will forward those concerns to the president and the other folks involved with the planning process, and we'll try to adjust. It's more important to do this right than it is to do it super fast. And with that, I will turn things over to President Sandiford.
Great. Thank you, Matt, for that introduction. And I appreciate we talked about that, Matt, about different ways for people to get information in. You know, it's interesting. One of the things I'm still trying to get my head around is in COVID time, I've been here, I think, 8 months. Sometimes it feels like 8 years. Sometimes it feels like 8 days. And the fact that for a variety of reasons, I just haven't had the opportunity to really interact with you all as much as I would like. It's interesting how many people I've not met in person yet, and had a chance to meet many of you online, but not in person. So I know that our ability to create relationships that would build a level of communication and trust has been challenged by that. But I want everybody to feel comfortable asking and giving feedback. So you're always welcome to give that to me directly. I'm open to that. I value that. And I absolutely understand that that may be uncomfortable for some people. And if it is, please don't hesitate to work through Matt or somebody else to get that information to me. So I just want to kind of set that up. And I also want, before I get in to talk about the strategy, I really want to spend just a minute. This is my first opportunity to see some of you this semester. I'm looking around. I think this might be the first opportunity for me to see some of you ever, which is kind of exciting. I'm glad to see some new faces that I perhaps haven't seen before, which is exciting. And I know it was a really challenging semester last semester. And I just wanted to say thank you for helping us navigate what ended up being, for me, and I suspect for many of you, the weirdest, most complicated semester of my career. And it's interesting, one of the things that we anticipated as we were going towards the end of the semester, the students, as you all know, because many of you were up close and personal with the students, they were very stressed. They were very concerned. They were absolutely convinced that everything was falling apart and they were not going to survive the semester, that GPAs were going to be way down, et cetera, et cetera. And in the end, they did just fine. One of the things we looked at the end of the semester is we paid very close attention to average GPA, which actually was slightly up, not significantly so, but slightly up from prior years. We looked at withdrawals and just looked at a variety of factors. And in the end, everybody did okay. I don't think everybody loved it. It was really, really challenging for everyone involved, but they did okay. That's a compliment to our students, and that's a compliment to you all for helping them get through this really, really difficult semester. So thank you for that. I just wanted, every chance I get to talk to people for the first time this semester, I just want to say thank you for helping us get through that really, really challenging semester. The other thing that's not lost on me, I'm a big fan of, when you're a business professor, as I was for many years, you often get the question, what's your favorite book? Good to Great, for those of you who might be familiar with it, is one of my favorites. And they always talk about confronting the brutal facts, being really honest about where you're at and the challenges you're facing. We've got another tough semester ahead of us. I'm not naive to that. And I know for those of you that are back in the classroom, which started yesterday, right? I'm not totally missing that. Yeah, started yesterday. For those of you that are back in the classroom, this dual hybrid format, I've joked with many that I miss teaching, but boy, not right now. It's brutal. And I know that it's a lot of work. And I know it's going to be another tough semester. There's hope on the horizon. We have good sense now of how the vaccine may be playing out. And I suspect even by the end of the semester, things will begin to change significantly. We're not there yet. And it's going to be another tough semester. I feel confident we'll get through it because we've done it once before, but it's not without significant effort. And I know that. So thank you in advance for all the effort that I know goes into this semester as well. Part of the reason I want to share all that is, first of all, I did want to say thank you. I can never say thank you enough for the work that you do. The other reason for sharing it is if I were in your seats, one of the questions I'd be asking is, with all that's going on, with all of the extra work associated with navigating through the pandemic, with all the things that we're trying to navigate and deal with right now, why are we doing this now? Why are we actually talking about strategy today? Everybody has their plates more than full as it is. So I thought I would spend just a minute explaining to you why I think it's really important that we begin this process now. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about why I think that's so important. And then what I'm gonna do is I'd like to kick it over to Chris Jones. And Chris is going to talk a little bit more. Matt already gave you some hint to some of the process, timeline, keeping a little bit more concise, figuring out how to get people involved without overwhelming people, which are great highlights, Matt. So thanks for sharing that. And Matt's been a great partner in thinking through a lot of this as well. But I'm going to let Chris Jones talk through the process. And I'll start by talking about why I think it's important we do this now. As is often the case, I would entertain questions or comments anywhere along the way, and we'll try to find breaks in the conversation to create that opportunity. But again, feel free to ask questions anywhere along the way. So why now? One of the things that I think all of us have probably seen and observed is our market is being seriously disrupted. And I didn't look at the Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed, kind of two of my biggest sources today, but it seems like every other day there's another article about the demise of higher education and the tensions we're going through. The whole world is struggling right now. So this is not just unique to higher ed. But perhaps one of the things that is unique is we have some pending changes come in our direction that were pushing higher ed prior to the pandemic. I think many of you are probably aware of the enrollment cliff, as they describe it, that will come likely in about 2024, where we expect, especially in the Midwest and the Northeast, which obviously impacts us significantly, there is a projected significant decline in enrollment. And one of the weird fun things about our industry is we can look ahead. We know what our supply of potential students looks like long before they arrive, because we can see them in the pipeline going through the school system now. And we know that that's coming. And to some extent, some of the pressures that were already existing on higher ed have been accelerated because of the pandemic. So the stories you're hearing around the projected demises of higher education, quite frankly, have been occurring before the pandemic and have now been a bit accelerated. One of the things that I've been watching with interest is the number of schools that I think have increasingly resigned themselves to the fact that they're going to see a significant decline in interest. And why I say that is then you see these schools that are making some very significant structural change decisions. And that's the one that I've been watching with some fascination. These schools that are talking about a 25% decline in staffing and in programming. And those are coming up with great regularity. And I'm seeing those kind of as it increased at an increased rate. And what I see when I see that is that they've resigned themselves to the fact that they're going to have to absorb this decline and that there's really no other way to deal with it. And what I want to start thinking about is that we don't have to accept the decline as inevitable. That is not something that we have to say. I mean, there is going to be a decline in demand in terms of the number of students, but the decline in demand here at Bradley is not inevitable. That's something that we can actually influence. That's something that we can navigate. And one of the things that I've really come to appreciate over the last 8 months, I'm going to be repetitive, so I know some of you heard me say a lot of this stuff before, but if you really want to understand an organization, watch it operate in crisis. And boy, does that really bring out the true nature of an organization. And I've watched you all operate in crisis, and wow, do we have some just amazing underlying strengths. And that really has come forward for me in the past 8 months. So there's this tremendous underlying strengths. And what I want to do now is I want to be really thoughtful about how we don't accept the inevitability of the industry decline, but we're thoughtful about how we navigate through that and build on our strengths so that we don't have to accept the inevitability, but in fact can be in a position where we continue to be strong. And the reason I want to do that now is I want to start implementing the type of things that position us for long-term success before we hit the point where we have to start making a bunch of really unhealthy decisions, the kind of decisions you're seeing at a lot of institutions throughout the country right now. So that's why I think the timing matters. Here's an opportunity for us to really get ahead of a curve that's coming, to some extent is already here, but to really get out in front of that and start thinking about how we position ourselves today for long-term success. And as I say all that, and again, Matt Tim's been a great partner on this, and he says, but you know, everybody's really busy right now. So Matt has been a great partner, and just reminding of that we have to be smart about how we do this, because this is going to be a bit of a heavy lift, and it's going to take some tenacity. We're going to have to be thoughtful about it. But I'm pretty confident that this is something we need to do now, and I'm confident we can do it now. One of the things I did a little bit over the break is I spent some time reading more about our founder, Lydia Moss Bradley. And Chris Jones and I've talked about this a lot. We should talk more about her and her legacy. She is an absolutely amazing individual. And if you look at the very genesis of this university, we were kind of born out of tragedy. I mean, she had, I hope none of us experienced the level of adversity she experienced in her life. And yet she took that and turned it into something really great. And so we're in a tough spot right now. The world's in a tough spot right now. We're not alone on that. The whole world is there. But what I'm hoping is that we can kind of pull from that founding DNA and say, no, out of this tension comes an opportunity to thrive and to move forward. And what I really want to do is I want to push on that. The other thing that really became interesting to me is, as I was looking at it, I've been back over our mission multiple times recently. I'm going to look down and read it verbatim because I want to make sure I get this exactly right. Our mission, as is stated currently right now, is that Bradley University empowers students for immediate and sustained success in their personal and professional endeavors by combining professional preparation, liberal arts and sciences, and co-curricular experiences. Alongside our dedication to students, we embrace the generation, application, and interpretation of knowledge. And one of the great things about spending some time understanding the foundation of the university is that mission is so perfectly aligned with the founding mission of who we are. And that's as true today as it's ever been. One of the questions I've gotten a little bit in the strategy process is, are we going to redo our mission? Like, no, mission's foundational. And the mission is solid. As I read through that, and as I spent some time trying to better understand kind of the foundational principles of the university, that mission is as true today as it's ever been. So this is not a conversation around changing the mission. The mission is so well thought out, and it has been from our very beginning. What will change is how that mission plays out in today's environment. And that's something that we've got to be really thoughtful about as we think about how we move forward. How do we avoid becoming victims of these pending changes that are happening, but instead really use this as an opportunity to say, okay, out of some of these challenges comes an opportunity for us to surge ahead. And again, it goes back to how we started as an institution. I think there's a real opportunity for us to take this moment in time and turn it into an opportunity to really surge forward. The other thing that makes me optimistic about this is I think, if for lack of a better term, I think the whole world is tired right now, understandably so. The whole world's tired, sleepy. I can feel organizations taking a step back. And especially as higher education becomes increasingly challenged, what a great opportunity while everyone else is stepping back for us to step forward and say, where do we go next? How do we really push the boundaries of who we are and continue to live into that commitment of empowering our students for immediate and sustained success. I love that statement, by the way. So it's so relevant today as it's ever been. So that's why I think it's important to do this now. It's an opportunity. It's a horrible time. It's absolutely the right time. And so we are going to start moving ahead. One of the things then that becomes challenging is what happens next? How do we actually make this happen? And as Matt alluded in his opening comments, it's going to go fast. We don't have the time, energy, luxury to really drag this out. So we're going to be brisk about it. We're going to be thoughtful about it. We're going to find ways to create lots of engagement, but we're going to seize the moment and really push forward as quickly as we had. And kind of my vision of it is, as the rest of the world is waking up from the pandemic, they see us on a steady jog, already pulling away. My competitive spirit kicking in, I gotta be careful there, but this is really an opportunity for us to kind of take command of our future and really push it forward. And what I get really excited about is we're very fortunate to have Chris Jones helping us with this. I gotta say, Chris is such, those of you that have probably worked with him before, you know this, he's got some really awesome project management skills amongst the other many skills that he has. And he's really laid out a nice process for us to kind of get through this in an inclusive but quick way. And our goal is to have this actually in front of and approved by the Board of Trustees at a June meeting, so that we can have it worked into the budget. So when the budget is approved in August, we've understood the need for and allocated the resources to make this happen. And that's approved in June, and then at the August board meeting, we're actually getting it approved. To do that, as Matt said, we're not going to try to do everything in the strategic plan. We're not going to be creating a new operational model for the university. There are a lot of details we'll have to continue to finesse and work out. Think of it as directional. What are the 3 or 4 key things that help us directionally get moving in the right direction? And that's really what the strategy is designed to do. Now, how do we do that? I'm going to turn it over to Chris Jones here in just a second to talk more through what that actually looks like from an operational perspective. And now I'm going to stop talking for a minute, though, before I do that, and just pause to see if anybody has any questions or comments about some of what I've shared. Y'all saving the comments for Chris? Is that you save the tough ones for Chris? All right. If they come up, happy to come back to things, happy to go back over some things if it's helpful. If you have questions and you're trepidatious about asking those openly, please do send them to Matt or put them into the chat and let us know. But if there aren't any immediate questions, I'll turn things over to Chris to talk a little bit more about what the process looks like.
Okay, thanks, President Staniford, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you and welcome back. And thank you so much to Matt for organizing this forum. And thank you for being here at the busy start of another semester. I just want to reiterate, I think what Matt was trying to stress, that we really want there to be open channels of communication. And I really prize transparency and inclusion and collaboration. So I want you to feel that you can reach out to me at any juncture if you want to discuss something, ask a question, express a concern. I hope that among those of you who know me, you would feel comfortable approaching me directly. But of course, if you want to, share your concern or your question with Matt Tim or your dean or your VP or whatever is most comfortable, your senator, please do so. But I will try to be as responsive as I can throughout the process to you.
Chris, can I jump on something real quick, by the way, since you're asking about questions? And I just noticed a question in the chat.
Okay.
And so what I might do is, and I think it ties into talk nicely about it right now.
Okay.
Valerie Bennett, am I saying that right? Correct, Valerie? Is it perfect? Ask the question of how do you see, it's a great question, by the way, how do you see strategic planning and accreditation review aligning, specifically HLC accreditation? And that's it's a great question because we are in the heat of the HLC accreditation as well. It's a great question. What I would see HLC as well as a number of other things we're working on. The Huron work is another one that people have asked about. How does that tie in? Some other things we're doing. This is all input into the strategy, if you will. So this will be information that we share with the groups that are thinking about and talking about how we want to move forward. They'll be given information like the HLC report, like the Huron report, and that information will become input that we use as we start thinking about what we do moving forward. Chris, does that sound, I mean, you've been working on this a lot as well. Does that sound about right to you? So.
Right. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
So let me share a few pieces of information overall, and then talk a little bit about the process. First of all, I want you to know that Matt Tim's been a great thought partner and colleague in this process. And given the importance of the faculty, as well as the staff, I've taken his advice to heart as we talked about pieces of this. And it really is a balancing act, like President Staniford was saying, about moving forward quickly, but also in an inclusive way. And also have sought advice from some of the VP of the non-academic divisions, as well as we've crafted this process. You're also going to hear, I think, along the way, Dr. Aaron Buchko's name. And I think Steve and I took to heart the recommendation of the Senate Ad Hoc Committee when they stressed back in the spring or summer, I can't remember exactly when, that we have a lot of talented people on campus and internal resources to leverage, that we don't always need to go out and hire a consultant. And Aaron Buchko agreed to serve in a consulting role to President Staniford and myself and the university when it comes to strategic planning, based on his professional expertise and experience. And Aaron's been exceedingly generous in his time and his counsel as we've gone through this process. So, when we talked about lining up aspects of the process, Matt and Aaron have been great partners to Steve and I as we moved along, as well as other people on campus. The process that we have essentially encompasses 14 different steps. And it really started back in November. So you might recall that Steve asked me to come into this new role in about October, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, he told me we were doing strategic planning. I don't know if he really told me that before I took the job. So I spent the last 3+ months trying to calibrate this process with the help of some of the people that I mentioned. And I think many of you, if you've attended university senate meetings or you've been part of different leadership groups on campus, I think you have some sense of the process, because President Staniford did a very good job, I think, of going out and talking to the Senate on December 9th. And before that, the Senate Executive Committee, and we talked to the Council of Academic Deans and the senior leadership team and the Administrative Council. So I think a lot of this information is out there. Also, when we recently circulated the Qualtrics survey to the faculty and staff, which of course is completely voluntary, and you have, I think, until tomorrow to complete it. We put it out about 10 days ago. There was a 2-page overview there as well of the process. And we will put that 2-page document also on the strategic planning website sometime next week. But I still nonetheless want to go through it. And I think the first thing is to talk about establishing the process. So we put together these steps, and we vetted it with some groups on campus, including the Senate. And then we had President Staniford approve the process as of December 15th. And then it was time, because there are different faculty and staff groups and teams that are going to be responsible for certain tasks within that process, it came time to populate those teams. And as I go further along in my remarks, I'll tell you a little bit more about how those teams were populated. But I kind of see that as sort of like setting up the process. Okay, what are the steps? What are the teams? Who are the colleagues that are going to fill these teams? The next phase that we're into now is what I would call external data gathering. We are now working with a firm, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a bit, that's doing a market insights analysis, is providing information about what's driving students and adult learners in this environment to go to college, and what are they seeking. And we're talking to people who know nothing about Bradley and people who know a great deal about Bradley. And it's a very interesting mix, and I'll share some details in a minute. We're having 2 Senate forums, one now and one on Monday. And is it Monday, Matt? Yeah. And that's going to be a source of information gathering. We are going to have student focus groups led by faculty and staff, which seek to gain information from our students, but also validate the data from the external market analysis. And I alluded to the Qualtrics survey, which went out on the 19th, and that you're certainly encouraged to complete if you wish to do so. That's an important source of external data gathering as well. So that's sort of the area that we're in right now. We're doing these things to lay the groundwork for what I would say the next phase would be foundational work. And this is where we're going to have faculty and staff teams come together. They're going to work for 4 or 5 weeks, and they, depending on their assignments, are going to hold the focus groups that I referenced, or they're going to work together to produce a strategic profile for the university that talks about where Bradley has alignment and does not have alignment with the needs of higher education learners. There's going to be another faculty and staff team working on an environmental analysis or scan, and looking at when that higher education landscape that Steve referred to, where are the challenges, where are the opportunities for Bradley University. And then lastly, we're going to have a faculty and a staff team working on a competitive assessment to see how Bradley stacks up against other institutions with regard to its advantages and disadvantages within that higher education environment. At the same time, a strategic leadership group will start gearing up work, focusing on some critical assumptions that will drive the process. And the USPC, the University Strategic Planning Committee, is putting together, under the leadership of Joby Skaggs and Jenny Burge, a strategic plan accomplishments document, which looks at our current plan and what we've accomplished and what we haven't completed yet. And that will be key information as well. So what I'm trying to say here, as we get further along in the process and a strategic leadership group engages in work and the USPC engages in work, they're going to have the benefits of this market analysis. They're going to have the benefits of a faculty staff survey. They're going to have the benefits of focus group information. They're going to have a strategic profile. They're going to have an environmental scan. They're going to have a competitive assessment. And of course, we will have the Huron report available. We'll have the HLC assurance argument available. So there'll be all kinds of rich pieces of information that can be drawn upon that we as a community have worked together to generate as we move forward with this process. And once those pieces are put together through largely the month of February and into March, then the strategic leadership group, which will be headed by President Staniford, will be a smaller group, will start to craft a vision statement and a strategic position for the university, and also set goals and metrics. And once that strategic position and vision statement and goals and metrics are in place, then the strategic leadership group will go back to USPC, the University Strategic Planning Committee, and ask them to generate action items, tactics that would realize the strategic vision and goals set by the leadership group. And those will become prospective action items that will then go back to the strategic leadership group for consideration as the final plan is formulated. And then once that plan is formulated, we're also talking about, what resources would be needed to realize these goals. And as Matt Tim was saying appropriately, we're not talking about a laundry list here. We're talking about 3, 4, 5 things that could really make a difference to the university, really play on our pillars of distinction, if you will. We will ultimately take the strategic plan to the Board of Trustees for approval and have resources attached to those action items. One of the things that I've stressed is I don't think we can be successful if we don't put the resources behind our action items. But we can't do everything either. I think we have to be very selective about the 3, 4, 5 things that we're really going to focus on, and if you will, kind of double down on to make an impactful difference for the university. And then once the board acts, we would have a communications plan. We would monitor the progress quarterly. We would allow for adaptability and flexibility within the plan as we go forward. Each year we would be looking at the plan, seeing where it needs to continue, where does it need to change. And then hopefully we would cascade the plan into the various divisions and colleges to say, okay, all right, develop your own strategic action plan that's in alignment with the university plan, but at the same time is customized and particularized to your college needs and to your division's needs. So that's essentially where we are in terms of process. I would like to tell you right now what we've accomplished so far. So the first thing that we have accomplished is we have populated the faculty and staff teams. So I want to thank President Staniford and Vice President Thomas and all the deans and the Senate Executive Committee and Matt Tim for thoughtfully appointing colleagues to fill the focus group, convener group, the strategic profile team, the environmental scan team, the competitive assessment team, and the strategic leadership group. And of course, USPC, which is populated per the handbook, is also a player in this process. So to give you some sense, if you said, well, Chris, how many people are involved in this process right now? I would tell you, if you're talking about the focus groups and the 3 teams that are going to produce the strategic profile, the environmental scan, and the competitive assessment, we have 36 faculty and staff members across all 5 colleges and all divisions. And I really want to thank Nathan Thomas for being very thoughtful about his appointments and making sure we had people from enrollment management and student affairs and other areas, athletics, not just from student affairs. So he did a great job that way. And then the Senate Executive Committee and Matt Tim deserve kudos because their job was, after I gave them the list of most of the appointments, to go back and say, do we have a diverse set of colleagues here? Do we have appropriate sources of expertise? So they got the last say on what some of those appointment slots were to these teams. So 36 faculty and staff members across those teams. And then you add 20 faculty members and staff members for USPC. And then you add 16 members of our community to the strategic leadership group. We have 72 colleagues, faculty, staff, and administrators involved in this process. Now, could one slot change here or there? Yes, it could. And once it's finalized, I will post the list of players, if you will, willing servants would be probably more appropriate, on the strategic planning website, along with other information. So teams are populated. Senate forums are scheduled, that's done. Qualitrix survey is out and it closes tomorrow. And we have engaged Questure, which is a firm in Des Moines, Iowa, to conduct the external market analysis. And I could provide more information about that, but I am worried about making sure there's time to ask questions. Right now, what Aaron Buchko and I are working on are a set of charters or guidelines that will hopefully be helpful to the teams of faculty and staff members who are going to be engaged in the strategic profile work, the competitive assessment, the environmental scan, and the focus groups. And we're identifying key objectives, deliverables, processes, due dates, along with a set of resources that those teams can draw upon as they go about their work. As we have information and as we produce these documents, I will make sure that they are all posted on the university strategic planning website for the sake of transparency. With Matt's support, I'm willing to provide regular updates at Senate meetings. And as I said, you can contact me at any time moving forward. And again, I would say that we're going to see how this goes. Matt said we want to go fast, but we want to do this right. And I would agree. If we have to make adjustments, if we make a mistake, if we're inattentive to something, if we're going too fast, then we're going to try to calibrate it and correct it. Okay, I don't think there's any shame in that. So I don't think anybody has a corner on exactly how to do this perfectly, and it won't be perfect, but we'll try to do it as best we can, and we'll try to do it in a collaborative, inclusive way. And again, please reach out if you have questions. So I'll leave it there and see if anybody wants to raise anything. I'm happy to talk about various aspects of this, but again, I'm looking at my clock. So thank you.
I think we're done with sort of the formal presentation piece. And both the president and Chris Jones are here to listen to you. That listening can take the part of either answering your questions about process or answering other sorts of questions. But they're also here to try to collect information about what you think is important going forward as we think about this strategic planning exercise. So please feel free to say what's on your mind. And again, if you're listening on the live stream, or you can email me questions or comments. If you don't feel comfortable asking in person, put it into the chat, in the private chat, of course, not in the public chat. And I will forward the question to President Standiford or Chris Jones or myself, or whatever the appropriate individual. So the floor is open for your comments and questions.
Chris, I have a question. Chris,
Okay.
all right.
Andrew Stubar, I don't, Chris, if you can see me.
Yep, I see AJ.
Okay, so, and pardon me if this is too detailed, but I always get a little concerned when we say market analysis and it applies to the institution. When I know a lot of times the market is maybe a similar market for the undergraduate experience, but for graduate schools, each graduate program has its own market, which is very, very different from perhaps the broader institution. Like the survey said, you know, who are competitors? Well, it's like, well, from what perspective is that? So my concern is, you know, is that market analysis going to be broader in that perspective, or is it just going to focus on your typical undergraduate? And I say that because, you know, everybody, at least in the past, has been saying, oh, we got to look to graduate programs for us to grow enrollments. But honestly, in the past, you know, I've been here almost 30 years. there has been no market support for graduate programs. Every program has been pretty much left to their own and left to their own budgets to market their program, and no assistance from enrollment management for graduate programs in that regard. So I guess I just expressed that concern going forward. What is that market analysis going to look like? And is it going to include some aspect of graduate programming, which is really diverse also?
Right. It will include a broad set of learners, and it's really a fundamentally different type of market analysis. It's based on what's known as jobs to be done theory, which was created by Clay Christensen, who was a Harvard business professor. And it really looks at the underlying reasons why people go to college or why they seek additional higher education and training. And because there are different cohorts within this pretty broad regional and national sample that Questor is developing for us, we expect there to be space for the graduate school piece. And what's nice is this firm is really working with us as, I think, authentic partners, AJ. And I think we can go back and push on that. They're only engaged in phase 1 right now. And I want to assure people on the call that they are talking to our students, as we will in our focus group, but they're also looking at students who considered Bradley University and chose to go elsewhere. But they're also looking at a broader set of students in the Midwest or nationally who might not know Bradley, but will give us an indication as to what they're seeking in higher education choices now in 2021 and going forward. So we're attentive to that, AJ, and if we find early on, and I'm probably repeating myself now, that we're not getting what we want, we will push back a little bit on that. We know graduate education, particularly in certain areas, is really important to Bradley University, and we've been successful in those areas.
Okay, thanks, Chris, for that response. Appreciate it.
If appropriate, I have a couple of comments about what I hope would end up in your final plan. First of all, I'm glad to see that you said it'll be narrow. And my thought is, if you can't explain your strategic plan in one page, it's too complicated. We've had a lot of strategic planning processes here, and honestly, I can't think of many home runs that have come out of them. So my second comment is, I think you should look around Bradley and see where have the home run programs come from. And so I'm an accountant, I live in a silo, but I think they come from bottom up rather than top down. I know in my college, the whole entrepreneurship program started with Fred Fry in an entrepreneurship class, which became a minor, which became a major, which became a school of entrepreneurship. In my world, in accounting, when the CPA exam changed, we came up with the 3-2 program, which was really innovative at that time. And so I think if you're looking for innovative programs, there's people out there who have ideas. And as you mentioned earlier, they're just very busy and have other priorities right now. But with some encouragement and opportunity, I think there's a lot of good stuff that people would love to work on if given the chance. So think about that. And this is maybe my final comment. I really hope your plan includes I guess, marketing or advertising program to communicate how we achieve our mission. Because I think there's a lot of people looking for that type of school. And my example of where, obviously I think we can improve, every time I look at the Bradley website, I go nuts. Because there's 6 video clips on there, 3 of them are snowstorms. 1 of them is somebody grabbing a coffee cup, blurry Christmas lights, and somebody walking by the wall that has Bradley University on it. And that's not what we are. That's not who we are. And so communicating our good programs, communicating, what happens outside of the classroom in college is just as important as in the classroom. So staying focused, that 1-page explanation, exploring how ideas can come from the bottom up, and doing a great job of communicating how we achieve our mission are my 3 suggestions for your plan. I put those in the survey, but since you're asking for ideas, I'm sharing those with you. Thank you for the chance to share.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for completing the survey.
Yeah, really great feedback. Thank you.
This is Haley. One of the things I think might be a good chance for Bradley to do going forward is also to really thoughtfully think about how we could bust some of the silo mentality or silo thinking and search for integrated and holistic kinds of ideas that would combine the competencies and interests and strengths that we already have, rather than thinking through disciplinary lenses.
It's great. And nobody's doing that well. So there's an opportunity space there if we could figure out how to do it.
Particularly if we
And
could
that
extend that to our engaged learning as well.
The global opportunities would feel drop right into that pocket as well.
I have a, oh, go ahead, Rob. I already had my piece.
I just wanted to kick in a humane caveat. Looking at the 70 good people who have already gotten involved in this process. And as the president had said, recognizing how busy we all are in this extraordinary pandemic era. And I think that we have to allow other committees to be underpeopled as major priorities like this draw so many and so much human capital from faculty and staff that Senate subcommittees and department committees and other committees, we have to be good to ourselves and say it's okay to have 8 out of the 10 on this committee at this time, while so much good is happening over here. Very much like that principle in a Japanese household. If a chair comes in the front door, another one goes out the back. We can't just keep adding on right now, because as at the beginning of this meeting, it was recognized people are very stressed. But this is a high priority, and all of these people have agreed to serve. And that means they're being pulled out of other things. And I've already felt it on committees that I chair. So maybe we will be a little understaffed in some other areas. That's my point. Thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's something we have to be really thoughtful about. Strategy truism is you don't have a strategy until you decide what not to do. And part of this process, we've got to decide some of the things that we're going to not do so that we can do what we need to do. I think that's a really good insight. We'll just have to be really thoughtful about that.
And I think within this process, there's a real division of labor. So if you're a member of one of the teams, we hope that this is not going to be a service commitment that extends throughout the whole semester, that it might be very focused in hard work for 4 or 5 weeks, but then the ball is handed off to another set of colleagues who are going to do something else. So I hope in some way that alleviates some of the concern as well.
Did I see somebody raise their hand? When
Yes, that would be me.
Please.
Probably nobody really recognizes who I am. I'm the data coordinator at Foster College of Business. And I mostly work with the information, not with the people. So seeing all of you is great.
Great.
So I filled out the survey today, and a couple things came to my mind. We are experiencing enrollment decrease, and it's not a unique problem to Bradley. And we talked about the cliff, and you know, we should think about the higher education in a logistical way. Like, it is not standalone thing. We have a pipeline, we have the suppliers, and we need to be thinking about how are we gonna get those? They're not, we didn't, the number of students who are in certain age did not shrink it that much, but the people who are willing to take that higher education pursuit is shrinking.
Yeah.
So how can we train our suppliers, or how can we work with and develop our suppliers to get those students to us? And we do great things with the students who come here, but bringing them here and giving them the mentality that the higher education pays is, I think, the development part. So I was kind of saying we need to think about the higher education as a whole logistics system, not just a one standalone thing.
Yeah.
Second thing is kind of like piggybacking on what Simon said about branding and how we are showing our images. What we do, I don't think we present ourselves really well, or as well as we do. So branding, and yeah, you know, nowadays the technology has improved. A lot of most businesses use machine learning or artificial intelligence at the worst case scenario, using data analytics to power their own brand and image, and how to reach those people, and who are our targets, and how are they interacting. You know, all this is based on the analytics, and how are we using that? And
Yeah.
I'm not a marketing person, but I do know how the data works. But are we using that?
Yeah.
So that's something that we are really lagging. Higher education lags in our data analytics. On top of that, Bradley is lagging on the higher education, and then we are really struggling with this data analytics era. So those are my 2 points. I think hopefully some of them are helpful. Thank you.
They are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great. I'm hearing the branding theme, by the way. And by the way, I have a lot of friends that work in supply chain, so I like that model. That's a nice way to think about it, right? It's ours is a very complicated supply chain, and it doesn't hurt us to think that way. But also on the branding side, one of the things that I think is a strength of ours, but is also a challenge, is a long history of humility, and we've got to figure out how we can maintain that and yet be proud of who we are and be prepared to tell that story. And I think there's an opportunity there for us to do that better. I mean, I've been here now, what, 8-9 months. I sometimes lose track of time. I look at Jeff because we started the same business. Sometimes it feels like 8 months. Sometimes it feels like 8 days. Sometimes it feels like 8 years because of the weird environment we're in right now. But I continue to find things. I'm like, wow, we do that. Wow, that person's an alum. We have this program. And there's just so many good things that you got to work hard to find. And that we got to change that. That's got to be, so I think part of the strategy that's going to be on the execution side is how do we make sure that as we start moving down these paths, we're doing a much better job of telling that story. And I'm all in on that. I think it's an important part.
Chris, this is just a brief comment. It's Derek. Just been thinking strategically, I'd just like to throw out there, to consider our location. Sometimes I feel like Peoria is thought of as a liability or something better just left, to marginalize. But I mean, as we all know, there are strengths here, and we can capitalize on those strengths. And I think we don't really do that fully right now. So in the context of, thinking through these strategic initiatives, I'd just like to throw out that point.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on what Helia said about collaboration and how do we get that going? And so this was not in my survey response, so I'll share it with you. It's pretty simple. We used to have something in the Student Center called the Alumni Dining Room, and it served as a faculty and staff location to gather for lunch. And when Joanne Glasser was here, she expanded the Student Center to better serve students and never replaced it with a on-campus place where faculty and staff could gather. And I think you get a lot of good ideas at the lunch table. And we don't have that. And so I know you got to watch the budget, but if you want collaboration, it has to be encouraged. And we all work in different places. And so I still think we have a lot of people that would like to physically be together, not Zooming or Googling. And so what could be done to provide that space for faculty and staff from different buildings to meet at different times? So thanks again for the chance to share that idea.
If I could go off on that just a second, in the previous strategic planning, there was a section about collaboration, and some of the beginning, at least the thought to look at some of the barriers to collaboration on campus and the silos and those kinds of things. So I was heartened, Chris, and we had a conversation this summer about this, that there are, you will look at what was not completed in the previous strategic plan, because that very much was a plan to plan that was looking at some systemic issues that we had on campus that we really couldn't move forward strategically unless some of those things were addressed. And that's why that plan was so huge and cumbersome, and because it looked at so many of these kind of, I don't know, systemic, for lack of a better word, kind of issues that underlied and kind of brought out some of the barriers that we saw that needed to be addressed before we could move forward. So I encourage, to look at some of those things still yet that were on that former plan, because some of those issues I still think need to be addressed before we can move forward on perhaps some strategic initiatives.
And just to repeat, in case someone didn't hear me, USPC will produce a document, AJ, that will hopefully be informative in that way. We'll say, these things have been accomplished, these things were not completed. So I think it goes to your very good point. And that will be shared with the teams.
Okay.
I have a question. This question was asked of President Roberts when the previous plan was underdeveloped. Could you explain how athletics fits into the university's current model for strategic planning?
It's a great question. I think the way I would describe it is that will be informed by what our students tell us is important to them to some extent. And that's one of the advantages. It's interesting. Aaron's done a really good job of introducing us to some models that I think are going to really help us get our head around what our students are really interested in, what type of experiences they're after, what kind of outcomes are they after. And I anticipate that as we get that information, it will give us some insights on how we can leverage and how we can position athletics as part of that or not. And so I think this is one area where some of that research can help inform what might make sense there. No preconceived ideas. Very interested to see how that evolves. It's interesting. One of the things I'm personally trying to be very disciplined on is to let the process do its thing, and not to come in with too many preconceived ideas of where we should head. And that's challenging. My colleagues have to keep reminding me that no, we're going to let the process inform. And but that's something I think the process will help us get some sense out of that, and that market research will be a big part of that. Chris, does that sound about right from the way we've talked about some of these things as well to you?
Yes, and you've talked about, it being part of the experience, so that,
Yeah.
we have to look at academic affairs, we need to look at student affairs and engaged learning, we have to look at athletics and, see what our students are telling us and how that aligns us moving forward.
I'm so resistant not to talk much because I want to listen, but I got to share one of the things. By the way, Simon, I still miss the interaction too, and it pains me to no end that I haven't had a chance to meet many of you in person, but at least we can have a dialogue here. So I'm excited about that. But as I look at and start thinking about some of the issues we're talking about, understanding those experiences and what matter, one of the things that's been really fascinating for me this semester and last is when we've taken away, because we had to, the experiences for our students because of the pandemic, we've come to realize that there are things that they value more than we ever realized. I've talked with Walter about this. The interest of our students to have access to the library has been shocking. So who knew the library was that hot? They really want access to the library. Nathan's been part of those conversations too. We've gotten a lot of pushback on access to the library. So there are certain things in the experience that I think we're going to learn. We've learned some this year already, but we're going to learn through this research. There are certain aspects of the experience that are perhaps more relevant than some of us anticipated. And boy, it's been interesting. Take away those on-campus experiences, and we've gotten a lot of feedback on things that they really miss. And it'll be interesting to see what the research tells us on that. I often joke with folks, I was a professor for many years, so I've learned to tolerate long periods of silence while people decide to participate. So Jeff, were you going to make a comment?
I guess I have a question.
Great.
AJ had talked about graduate programs, and it was mentioned the importance of graduate programs, and we're trying to grow those. I'm just wondering if you can comment on the elimination of the graduate school and how we're going to promote graduate programs with no graduate school on campus.
So I'm still learning what that process looks like. Apparently there's a formal process that's going through, and there's some structure that's being rebuilt. I almost wish that Justin was on the line, because I know some of that's happening with enrollment services. And I know one of the things that's been a concern is how much has enrollment services been engaged in that process. And I don't know that, I'm still learning, but my sense is maybe not as much as would be desired in some cases. I think that's evolving. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of this process informs some of that moving forward as well. I know that's not a very complete answer, but it's something that we're looking at and thinking about. And I know it's something that is being looked at and considered as we continue to move forward. I'm trying to look at the chat a little bit as well. And a little bit about our community engagement and how that impacts. One of the things that will be important is we'll be doing our market research, but then it also what we do has to match with who we are. And I know that engaged learning is a really key aspect of who we've been almost from day one as an institution. There's some comments here around community engagement, community impact, and how we involve the community in some of this. And again, trying not to predict what's going to happen, but I can't imagine we would move away from that high level of engaged learning that is core to who we've been pretty much from day one. And I don't anticipate that's going to, what that looks like moving forward may continue to evolve, but whether engaged learning is a key part of who we are, it would be really strange for something to suggest that we would deviate from that.
President Sandiford, there's a comment specifically about engaging more with District 150.
Oh yeah.
And I might actually expand that to school districts in the local region more generally.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, I want to address the question. I want to be careful not to assume I know is that about engaging them in terms of recruiting students and partnerships and thinking, so more on the recruiting side? Yeah, I think,
The particular comment is about some sort of lab school partnership.
Matt, I would point out that is Seth's response to my comment.
Uh-huh.
That we have this unbelievably rich territorial laboratory for learning in teacher education, from the most small rural school down in Glassford to Whittier to Manual to, it is such an unbelievably rich place to study to become a teacher.
yeah,
And our partnerships with those schools have a long history, but as the teacher shortage expands throughout the country, we're already in a deep teacher shortage now. District 150 cannot staff their classrooms. I just have to believe that this is something that we can build upon, not just because of the need to serve the local districts, both urban and rural and everything in between, but what it can do to draw students, to grow enrollment,
yeah.
and therefore
like to-
lift the ship.
I'd like to put my 2 cents in it, because as Bradley has had actually a professional development school relationship with multiple school districts, but that was, we actually had a very specific relationship that nationwide was kind of special and different from other professional development school sites because of the multidisciplinary focus that we have had. Because the schools that we worked with, we also, besides teacher education, we had PT, nursing, FCS, other candidates in other disciplinary areas there. But the problem was it was a grant program, and once the grant went away, the university didn't see that as an important part of who we could be. Having been a Kemper Fellow, and I think there's another Kemper Fellow here too, Jana Hunziker, we really saw how valuable that was, not only as a pipeline to better, higher quality education in the area, but the connections that we were making were just amazing. And in all nationwide conferences, we were known as the place where the more holistic approach was being brought up. So I think that would be a wonderful area to look at this collaboration in more detail again.
Yeah.
It was also very disciplinary. So I'm in family and consumer sciences, and we were very involved with PDS projects, even though it wasn't as a part of teacher ed. We were just involved in terms of dietetics, public health education. And so it was a very interdisciplinary project.
It's interesting, and I hear some of this talked about in past tense, which is interesting, because that was sounded like that was a funded project that ended up fading out. But I'm a big fan. The term I use is collaborate to compete, right? I mean, the way we position ourselves and be successful in our disruptive market is by having great partners that help us do more things. We're doing a lot of things with OSF right now, Unity Point as well. We're agnostic. We're happy to work with all the healthcare industry. And District 150 is another one. I like this idea of once we kind of know how we can add value best to our students, I get really excited about, we've got so many great resources here, but there's so many great resources. There's more resources if we reach outside the boundaries of the campus and say, who can we partner with? And I do know the hospitals in the area are very interested in trying to figure out how to partner with us. I was talking to Sharon Karat even earlier this week from District 150, and haven't figured out what it looks like yet, but there are such neat opportunities to partner in so many different ways. And so that's a good thing to remember as we start thinking about the strategy, because one of the things you can often get wrapped into is, well, we can't do that because we don't have resources to do A, B, C. But you can say, well, we don't, but what if we partnered with? I mean, we've got the ag department. The Department of Agriculture has this massive facility literally across the road from us. And I know I remember I was walking through the building and I saw, sorry, I have this key that gets me into a lot of things, but then I did see one door that said USDA authorized personnel only. I'm like, yep, I'm pretty sure I'm not a USDA authorized personnel. So I didn't go in, even though it looked like one of the coolest rooms in the entire campus. I was dying to go in, but I resisted. But those are cool partnerships. How do we expand our resources by partnering with some folks around us? I get really excited about that idea. So that's, which is a great, I'm talking this out because I'm doing a little bit of mental note to self. Don't be constrained by the resources we do or do not have as we start thinking about the strategy, because there may be partners we can work with that add resources that allow us to get there. And you all are giving me a nice reminder of that as we have this conversation.
We also have a long history of faculty volunteering in the schools. Matt,
Right.
Craig Curtis, and I, and a number of other faculty members, Cecile Arquette, have done extensive volunteer time at Whittier, especially when our kids were there.
Yeah.
And those relationships with the district still exist. Sharon Karat was principal at Whittier when my kids were there.
Oh,
So I've known Sharon since she was assistant principal down the hill at Roosevelt School. And so there are relationships that exist there that we could reinvigorate and professionalize potentially. You know, I did pull out tutoring for kids with reading and math for years, or high-end groups, you know, enrichment sort of stuff. And we really, we could structure those, we could build them, we could get grants, you know, but that's all, as Rob will quickly point out. If we bring one more chair in, we must put one more chair out.
Right. This is really helpful, by the way. So I appreciate everybody chiming in, and we've got a little bit more time. So if anybody has any other pieces they want to share, this is really helpful.
I think I would build a little on something I just sent out in the text.
Yeah.
Is that always and everywhere when I see these partnerships, it winds up being some exciting aspect of engaged learning across disciplines, often across colleges.
Yeah.
For individual students, for teams of students. And those are the transformative experiences that our undergraduate students use to leverage their future and to make that transition to the next step after Bradley. And to me, this has always been the distinctive thing about Bradley, is our emphasis on engaged learning, regardless the discipline. And this applies as well to the graduate school, who can teach, those programs teach so much to us, the faculty, and also have overlapping circles in the Venn diagram of education. Our graduate programs have often provided great opportunity for upper level undergraduate students. And it all works toward the good. But when I hear all of these examples of partnerships, what I see is engaged learning for our upper level students.
You know, and one of the things you suggest there, which is really interesting, that I really like, is engaged learning that is almost by definition multidisciplinary, because the world's problems don't show up in clean disciplinary boundaries usually. So that's interesting. Maybe that's me. There was some suggestion earlier that that's something we need to think about, but that's one of the ways to stimulate that in a way that might be difficult to do otherwise. That's interesting.
And just as a follow-up, the deep dive type of engaged learning that is faculty guided research, which is so discipline specific, has that same effect. And also is often done in partnership with regional partners. So the interdisciplinary part is so common, and yet so too faculty guided research in an individual discipline.
I'm reading and taking notes on the chats as well about some of the other partnerships. Peoria Academy, the Juvenile Detention Center. I had a friend who actually taught finance to folks that were in juvenile detention centers, and it was transformational for her and the students. A finance professor that I used to work with. So that's interesting.
Hey, this is Danielle. I think I want to say something.
Perfect.
One is I'm loving all of the stuff that I'm hearing about the partnering, and I don't want to all of a sudden make it practical or pragmatic, but getting our students into places is the way that we get those places to send us their students. I'm sure that you all are ahead of me on that. I'm a slow processor, right? But the only reason my daughter was truly interested in coming here was because at Whittier, and she didn't want to come here because she was interested in the humanities and she knew all of the humanities professors already. She wanted to go somewhere else, right? Because she felt like it was having classes with aunt and uncle and so forth. So just to say, right, in my defense. But one of the reasons that she was truly interested was that in the 4th grade, a student athlete was doing an athlete pen pal program. She loved that. It was a young woman on the volleyball team, and she loved that and she was a Bradley student, and she wanted to be a Bradley student, right?
That's interesting.
So that and that's going to lead me to that other bigger point, which is that we're talking about partnerships, and I know we all mean this. When we say partnerships, we're talking about human beings and human relationships. And I think that we can lose track of the idea that what we're creating is human relationships. When we talk about Bradley partnering with a school, it ends up being a teacher at a school partnering with a teacher at Bradley, right? That's where that relationship happens. And the good thing about that is that then that teacher sends us our kids, which is my second point, that the school that my teacher, and I have 3, the school that my daughter ended up going to was the one that her history teacher graduated from. Right. So we need to get the teachers, and she's a Peoria kid. And but she ended up in Chicago at the school her history teacher went to. So if we want to, there's all that good stuff about reaching out to guidance counselors, but I think my daughter saw her counselor once. Right. Maybe in the whole 4 years, right? She saw her English professor and her history professor and her chemistry professor every day. So if we want those students to come to us, their teachers have to be saying, that's a good school. My final point is not really pedagogy or student related so much in terms of even getting them here, but keeping them here. We got to do something about this place on the weekends. It is an echoing wasteland. Right. There is no life. That's even before COVID. 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I could yell fire, right? And I could bring in a marching band and nobody would hear it, right? I know there are things that happen in dorms and so forth, but that speaks to, I think, an earlier comment about the life of Peoria and, promoting what Peoria has. That's a good thing, but there's also a whole lot that I think that we could do even more of that makes staying on campus a habit, including and not limited to that marching band I talked about. We don't have one, but having some classes on the weekend. Having a way for students to say, I'm taking my internship all week long, right? I'm at my internship on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Boy, I could use to take a class on Saturday. I think that also would appeal to adult learners, and that's my 2 cents.
That's interesting. You know, Daniel, some of the things you talk about too, one of the numbers I am aware of and paying attention to is our retention numbers. And feeling connected to the place helps a lot on retention as well. So that's something that it helps us in so many different ways. And it'll be interesting as we talk to the students of what they're after in terms of what they're looking as their experience. What are some of those things we could help enhance to make that more meaningful for them?
And there are seeds, you know, like the late night BU program and so forth. You know, when we do our NEDA National Eating Disorders Awareness Walk, if we ever get to do that again, 200 kids stay on campus for that, right? So there's a willingness if there's things, I think, to engage them. But otherwise, you can watch videos at home and get your laundry done.
I have taught at a previous institution and where we did weekend classes. You do 3 weekends would be a 3-credit class. They were extremely popular.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. Well, and it builds flexibility, not just for students, but also for faculty. If you're so inclined, if that's something you want to do, it's something that's not everybody want to do that, but some people would probably love it. So it's that's interesting. Huh.
Also, on the subject of changing routine scheduling, having more evening classes would make it easier for non-traditional students to take classes at Bradley. I believe, though I have no market survey data to back this up, that we have an untapped regional market of degree completion candidates, people who never went to college, but now might be interested, older people who are looking to take some classes. And I, for one, I can't speak for my colleagues, I would welcome having more non-traditional students in my classes. I find that when I do, that my traditional age students actually enjoy, you know, having somebody closer to their parents' age around who's not their parents.
Right. Has a different type of wisdom than their parents, which they probably don't maybe listen to as much.
Yeah, it's very Margaret Meady, you know, that idea that you need an elder in the community who's not your parents to teach you certain things.
Right. That's interesting. Well, and that's something I get excited about too, is being open to the possibilities of how might we want to do things different. I used to teach evening classes, and I enjoy it. I get a lot of non-traditional students, and I loved it, actually. Loved it. I did teach one semester. I taught from 6 to 10 at night and then taught at 7:30 the next morning. That was bad. I don't ever want to do that again, but we can make sure we don't do that. Don't schedule it that way, but there are other things we could do to be creative.
I do have one other question. This one's a question instead of a preachment. Where is fundraising in this strategic plan? What aspect of the strategic planning process is trying to get at that and understand how that's working?
So I have a passion for fundraising. I love that question, by the way. So it is a key part of our financial strategy for sure. But what I get excited about, and Aaron Genovese is on the phone here on the call here with us. It's both part of the plan, but it also ends up being fueled by the plan. One of the things that is a really important part of fundraising is you got to give people reasons to believe, something to get excited about. And part of the way we will fund the strategy is through fundraising. But you've got to have something that people can get excited about in the strategy to do that. So it'll be part of that too. Having a well-run fundraising shop is core to our existence, and Aaron's doing a really amazing job working to get that humming fast. So it's a key part of the finance strategy would be the way to describe it, but it's also informed by and fueled by the strategy. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's I think it's a really important part. One of the things I anticipate doing is, as we roll this out to the trustees, for example, they'll be involved in 2 things. One will be obviously proving it, but we'll hit them for fundraising too. I mean, I will be asking the board to help us figure out. Erin's smiling because she knows we're going to be doing that, right? That it's we're going to be looking to them to say, hey, help us figure out how to make all this happen. And part of that is by being philanthropic partners and making sure it happens as well. And that's something I get really excited about.
So might you be implying that the key elements, the key initiatives of the new strategic plan will be optimistic, forward-looking things that ordinary people can understand and get excited about, and
Yeah.
therefore want to invest in?
Yeah.
And that's how the strategic plan will fuel fundraising.
Yeah.
And that's not the way, in my experience, we have thought about strategic planning at Bradley in the past, that there would be, here are the areas that we all are excited about and you should be excited about too.
So I resisted jumping into this too much earlier when Simon commented on, but I am with Simon that if you can't describe your strategy in one page, you're not going to get anywhere with it. It should be a one page. It should be realistic but aspirational. It should be inspiring. And then there will be a lot of detail behind it. So there's going to be a lot of operational detail behind it. I'm not naive to the fact that for some of the things we'll want to do, we'll have to figure out what all those details are. But the details are critical, but they're not the one pager. The one pager is the aspirational driving piece that guides you towards the tactics that you then develop and move forward. But what we're really looking for in this process is what are those, boy, I don't mind using the term aspirational pieces that really get people excited and drive us forward. We undersell ourselves with some regularity. And I think the potential of who we are and what we can accomplish is immense. And I want to start telling that story. I want to start thinking that way and really start presenting that, because I think, and that'll get people excited. And Aaron and I will go out and do a lot of fundraising around that. That's something that we, and so it'll be aspirational, and everybody will say, well, you need resources for that. That's right. And if it's aspirational, we can get the resources for it. And that's one of the things that is really interesting and exciting for me.
And a lot of other people on this screen will also join us in fundraising. It's Steve and I certainly.
Well said, Aaron, by the way. Yeah, it was good.
Steve and I will not do this ourselves. We are going to need a lot of you. You're the ones that can tell the story, that make it so compelling. We're going to need you by our hip and on our shoulder and all those things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's fun to take all the credit, but we're gonna need a lot of help.
That's right. And to be clear, I feel immense responsibility to be the lead cheerleader on that. So just to know, this will be in my mind constantly, is I'd see one of my key responsibilities is helping you all get the resources to do the amazing things that we can do. And so that's Aaron and I will make sure that a big part of our role is to make sure that those resources are gotten. And that's a lot easier to do if we have an exciting story to tell, which we do, right? I mean, we already do. We just got to do a better job of telling it and tightening it up and getting a little bit more directed with some of it.
Danielle, did that answer your question?
So,
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on this for just a second more, and then we're about to run out of time. Some of you have heard me say I get excited about fundraising. Actually, what I really get excited about is getting other people excited about what we're doing.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned to me the other day, says, oh, you like fundraising, you like to get access to people's wallets. Like, no. I want access to their hearts. If I get access to their hearts, the wallet part will take care of itself. But if we can get people excited about who we are and what we're doing, they will be looking for opportunities to support us. And that's the kind of stuff I get excited about. So Matt, you were kind of the quarterback. So you just unmuted, probably about to go where I was going to say. I don't know what we had on time on this. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I'm available a little bit longer if people want to continue to chat.
That's what I was going to ask. So we have the answer. So if anybody has questions, we can go a little bit longer. You were having a long silence though, also.
We'll be doing this again on Monday. If you've processed a little bit and you want to come back on Monday, please be comfortable doing so. And this is one forum for having conversation, but hopefully there will be many more as well. And maybe you have something you want to send as an individual email, send it to me, send it to Matt, send it to Chris. This is, I've taken a lot of notes, as I'm sure Chris has as well. And so this has been really, really helpful. Thank you.
May I ask one more question? As
Sure.
I don't want to keep anybody, if anybody wants to leave, go ahead. At the Senate meeting, when this was presented, I had requested for you to consider building in a step toward the end of the process that would open the process back up and allow for the senators who are elected by their constituents from the faculty to have a final look and to give an approval. I think it would build a lot of support as it moves forward. Have you had the opportunity to consider whether you will be able to build that step in?
Yeah, so there'll be a step to give a final look for sure. That part I want to, we've talked about that. Absolutely, we're going to do that. What I need to work out is a really important part to me, and this more gets into the approval piece, Danielle, to your question, is the trustees have to own this. They have fiduciary responsibility around helping us get the resources to drive this forward. They carry the accountability. They're the ultimate authority in the accountability. So I need to think through what that looks like. Ultimately, the approving body is the Board of Trustees. And
to clarify, by no means do I mean that the Senate vote would outweigh the trustees, right? What I mean instead, though, is that, I mean, I do have some, what I do mean is that eventually you're going to have a faculty who will be integral to implementing
absolutely
portions of, I don't know what's going to change, right? But our buy-in is ultimately going to be important. Now, it sounds to me like, as you've stressed, 72 total people involved. That's good, right? It's a lot of human beings, but opening it back up to the Senate, and it's for the sake of that buy-in, the people who are going to have to live it, the better we feel about the inclusivity at those crucial decision-making steps.
Yeah.
The likelihood, from what I know of all of us, the likelihood that we would put it to a vote and people would say, nope, right? I don't see that happening, but what I see is that psychological need, right? To have that sense that we got to put our eyes on it and have one final discussion, right? That wasn't from folks who've been in the funnel.
So we'll work something out like that, Danielle, because I think so I would actually even go a little farther. It's not just important, it's imperative that people feel like they've been a part of this process and can be not just feel like it, but are in fact a part of the process. Because on the executional side of it, it's imperative, right? I mean, it doesn't happen unless people feel like they are part of the process. I hear you. We haven't quite figured out exactly what that back end looks like yet. We'll actually be meeting with the trustees. We have a trustee meeting on February 5th. And Chris is going to be sharing with the trustees our plan in detail. And I'll probably have a better sense of where they're at on this which is, I mean, the 5th is what, end of next week? It's a week from tomorrow. So it's coming fast. And we'll have a better sense of where they're at on this after that as well. So I hear you. Your previous question has been in my mind since you asked it, by the way, and I haven't lost it. And it's not a question of if, it's exactly what it looks like. Is that what we're still trying to work through? But I hear you, and I think that input is going to be. And I've actually had this exact conversation with our board chair and vice chair, and they want to know where how the faculty are feeling about this. That's going to be imperative to them as well. So how do we best make that happen? And that's just something we're still working through. But I won't lose it. So don't worry. I mean, I absolutely don't mind you bringing it up again, but it's in my mind, and I'll make sure that this is something we resolve somewhere along in the process.
Thank you. You know by now that I have a good memory in some things.
That's good.
Danielle or Matt, do you see other ways to accomplish the same idea. So in one sense, when you were talking, I was thinking about, well, does it have to be a vote or could it be an endorsement? And then I'm also looking at the comments and I'm looking at what David and Rachel and Alyssa are saying about sort of staff. And sometimes our whole community isn't engaged in that university senate process. So you wonder, is that the best venue? It is for some members of our community. It's a great venue, but I don't know if it is for everyone. So I'm wondering if anybody on the call has ideas about getting to the important point that Danielle was underscoring about buy-in, because that's incredibly important to our final success with implementation. It goes to Simon's point about, bottom up. I know that as a former dean, if there's not buy-in at the ground level, there's going to be, real trouble. It's not going to go well. But I'd just be curious if there are other ideas, even before President Stanford goes to the board. I mean, there might be some good things that he could vet formally and informally short of a Senate vote that might get us to the same place. So I'm just curious.
I have a comment. This isn't so much probably directly to answer your question, but I think there's a sense from the faculty, there's a big disjunct of understanding what the board is thinking as well. I mean, if the board wants to understand where the faculty is, I think the faculty want to kind of get a feel where the board is coming from.
Yeah.
And I think historically there's been a little distrust, some bad taste in our mouths with regard to actions of the board to kind of lead to where we're at financially now. I mean, there's some perceptions there, and that's all water under the bridge. I think maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure, direct communication, but some communication from the board to the faculty as we're working through this process. Because it seems like we work, and then we have this kind of board that nobody knows, nobody has any contact with or whatever, then approves. And I understand that's how big organizations work, but yet I feel like there might be some room for some communication with the board to the faculty as we work through this process. That's not really answering your question, but there is some distaste, I think, historically from the faculty with regard to some of the board decisions, and that might help heal that.
So it's interesting. I perhaps have, even though I'm like the newest person probably on the phone right now. Oh, no, Aaron, you are, I think, actually. That's what Aaron Witt said. I'm one of the newest people on the call right now. I am perhaps in a unique seat in that I get to interact with you all, and I interact a fair amount with the board. There are opportunities there in both directions for more engagement, more connection. And I can see that and I can feel that. And that's when we can start having face-to-face meetings again. I've seen in other environments where there are more structured opportunities for faculty, staff, and the board to interact. And I think that's something we can work on. And that's something I want to make sure we think about moving forward. And I've already had that conversation with our board chair, vice chair. They feel it and see it as well. Not a quick answer, but I hear you, and I see that as well. And by the way, it goes both ways. I think there's frustration in both directions, and I think it's just misunderstanding. And the interest and passions are far more aligned than I think most people realize.
Back to Danielle's suggestion. Certainly I agree. I wouldn't want anyone to be excluded, for staff or anything like that. However, that is an established process of shared governance on our campus already. And so I would also hope that we could continue using those processes.
This was for Chris's benefit. It's easy to do a campus-wide ballot now. Asking for support or endorsement or whatever, you use one of the survey tools, and you can do a survey.
So one of the things I want to be thoughtful about here, and I really. You go by AJ. Your name says Andrew on the sign, but you go by AJ. Okay, I picked up on that. Thank you, Chris. So to AJ's point, one of the things I want to do is I want to make sure that as we do this, it enhances the relationship with the board and doesn't degrade it. So what I can tell you, there will be board members that if they feel like they're being told what they have to do, that will go over just about as well as when faculty feel like they're being told what they have to do. So there's a dance there that we'll have to figure out is how do we create opportunities for dialogue, but it's actually dialogue and input. So I think it's really important the board knows where everybody's at on this. And I'm hopeful because of the way we created the process, there will be large support for what we're doing. But if there is, or if there isn't, the board still needs to know that, right? I mean, that's something that the board needs to be aware of. And what's the best way of communicating in a way that they hear it in a meaningful way? And so that's, Danielle, if you're sensing a pause on my part, that's the only reason there's a pause there, is kind of knowing where how that relationship is evolving. I want this to be a relationship building opportunity and not one that creates an enhanced sense of tension. And there's a solution there. I know there is. We just got to be thoughtful about how we walk into that and make sure that that's exactly where we land.
I think the length of the pause is suggesting it's about time to wrap things up.
Well, thank you everybody for participating, and truly I'm hoping there's a way we can continue the dialogue as this continues to evolve. We'll do another forum and we'll find other opportunities to create dialogue. It's so challenging in this environment. I'm a big fan of, I've been wandering campus, but it's lonely because not many people are on campus, but I'm hopeful that we can continue to create these forums so we can, and if thoughts, questions, comments that pop up, don't wait, you have to wait till we have a forum like this. You all know how to get a hold of me by email, Chris, and feel free to continue to share your thoughts. This has been really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thanks for all coming. Thank you for all of you for coming.
Thank you.